Okay, let's do this. Welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. This is session number 125. All right, session 125 of Kevin Reed's A Course in Miracles. Today, we are on page 324 in the text, which is chapter 15, section 10, Roman numeral 10. Okay. Section 10, entitled The Time of Rebirth. Okay. Just a little background. Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford, when they had their discussion about their department, their psychology department at Columbia, and the way people got along, Bill Thetford offered there must be a better way. There must be a better way to communicate, to get along with each other. And Helen Schuckman just automatically said, I will help you find it. And that, they say, was the invitation to the Holy Spirit. It opened the door for the Holy Spirit to come in. For the next 3 months, Helen was getting very vivid dreams, psychic dreams with very vivid imagery in them and things of that nature. And Bill suggested she write things down. And then after like 3 months or so, she all of a sudden took down, this is A Course in Miracles. Right? Please take notes. And from that time on, what she referred to as the voice, it was like an inner dictation. It's not that she was hearing voices, she said it was like an inner dictation. That was very clear to her, and it got clearer after the first few chapters, actually. Ken always says the first 4 or 5 chapters is it's like a static almost. And then it gets very smooth until the end, and the next 2 books. And it took 7 years to complete the text, the workbook, and a manual for students. Okay. That being said, this section was taken down around Christmas time, one of the Christmases that passed by in the course of 7 years. Okay. That being said, it's entitled The Time of Rebirth. And so it goes. It is in your power in time to delay the perfect union of the Father and the Son. For in this world, the attraction of guilt does stand between them. Neither time nor season means anything in eternity. But here, it is the Holy Spirit's function to use them both, though not as the ego uses them. This is the season when you would celebrate my birth into the world, yet you know not how to do it. Let the Holy Spirit teach you, and let me celebrate your birth through him. The only gift I can accept of you is the gift I gave you. Release me as I chose your own release. The time of Christ we celebrate together, for it has no meaning if we are apart. Right? The Christ has no meaning if it's not the entire sonship. Okay? And he says, release me as I choose your own release. All right? Don't project onto me. All right? See my innocence as I see yours. That's the gift he has given us is the atonement. You're not guilty of anything. You've never separated from your Father. All right. So, that's the only gift I can accept of you, is the gift I gave you. Release me as I chose your own release. And one of the things we do in the Western world is we project this specialness onto Jesus. Like he's the, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. As if Jesus is the only Son, right? We are all part of the mind that created the Jesus part of the mind. All right? We are part of that mind. Right? So to make Jesus special, like he's the only one, it's he's saying, release me from that. Okay, I'm not the only one. All right. Okay. So it's in your power in time to delay the perfect union of the Father and the Son. Once again, he's always going to remind us that within this ego experience, right, it is in our power to deny who we are, right, to deny the perfect union of the Father and the Son. Right? He says, because in this experience here, the attraction of guilt stands between them. Guilt is attractive. In other words, the thought of separation is attractive. The thought of being an individual is attractive. The thought of being in the oneness, in the one mind of God, causes trepidation, to say the least. But he says, and he refers to it as being in time, because otherwise there is no time. Okay. He says, neither time nor season means anything in eternity. All right. So time doesn't mean anything in eternity, and neither does the season. All right. So it's Christmas season. So he says, really, it doesn't mean anything in eternity. He says, but here, the Holy Spirit's function is to use them both. We can use Holy Spirit can use anything we made. All right? We like to say in the Course of Miracles, we use time to escape from time. Right? And we will use the Holy Spirit will use the season of Christmas to teach us about who we are and our relationship to our Father. Right? This is the season when you would celebrate my birth into the world, yet you know not how to do that. He says, let the Holy Spirit teach you, and let me celebrate your birth through him. All right? Jesus says, let me celebrate your birth through connecting with the Holy Spirit and remembering who you are. Right? Then everyone will celebrate. Party time. Release me as I choose your own release. The time of Christ we celebrate together. We celebrate the time of Christ together. We, in time, celebrate the Christ child being born into the world, joy to the world. All right. The Lord has come. All right. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Okay? All that. All right. He says, let me teach you that you are that. Right? You are the joy of the world. Right? You are the instrument of peace and goodwill in the world. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, right? You can be an instrument of peace and goodwill. And all you need is the desire to do that. It's that willingness to be in the holy instant, joined with Jesus, Holy Spirit, the memory of who you are. And as we walk through this experience, we will be the bearers of light and peace and goodwill. All right? The time of Christ we celebrate together, for it has no meaning if we're apart. All right? He says, look, the time of Christ really has no meaning if you think you're apart from the oneness. Okay. Paragraph 2. The holy instant is truly the time of Christ. For in this liberating instant, no guilt is laid upon the Son of God, and his unlimited power is thus restored to him. What other gift can you offer me when only this I choose to offer you? And to see me is to see me in everyone, and offer everyone the gift you offer me. I am as incapable of receiving sacrifice as God is. And every sacrifice you ask of yourself, you ask of me. Learn now that sacrifice of any kind is nothing but a limitation imposed on giving. And by this limitation, you have limited acceptance of the gift I offer you. All right? By sacrificing, you're diminishing yourself. So there is no need to sacrifice. I don't accept sacrifice, Jesus says. All right? I'm incapable of receiving sacrifice, just as God is. So there's no need for it. You're not lesser than I am. You're not less than me. Right? As a matter of fact, I see you the way you are. You don't need to punish yourself. Okay? And he says the holy instant is truly the time of Christ. Right? We are joined with the Christ in the mind. Right? And you can spend as much time there as you like. All right? For in this liberating instant, there is no guilt. There's no guilt laid upon the Son. There's no guilt laid upon you. All right? And your unlimited power is restored to you. In that holy instant, your unlimited power is restored to you. And we're not talking about powers like Superman. Right? We're talking about the power to extend love, the power to extend peace and goodwill and security and all those good things. Right? That's the unlimited power that you have. And it's restored to you when you come in to the holy instant. Right? And it is. It's just that we experience it in the beginning as flopping from one side to the other. All right? We don't realize that in that moment that you spend in that stately calm within, all power is given to you. All your power is restored. All right? And then we become afraid of becoming a nebbish, or become afraid of being abstract. And we run back. Guilt is very attractive, as he says. All right? The idea of separation from the mind, the one mind, it's very attractive. Right? Guilt proves that we've separated. Okay? So the idea is to look directly at our thoughts and have them retranslated. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it's not. But there has to be that willingness, that active willingness, right? In the midst of some grand insult or something, when you're outraged, there's the choice point. What is it that I want to experience now? Do I want to experience the peace of the truth, the peace of my inner guide? Or do I want to strike out in retaliation for the grand insult, whatever it is? And hey, be honest. Sometimes striking back against the grand insult is, it's what I want to do. Right? We just have to notice, what are the results? What are the results of that decision? Is peace in your awareness? And then if it's not, then you know, oh, okay, I chose an ego solution. You don't come down hard on yourself. Or ego likes when you do that. And you just come back as many times as you can, as many times as necessary. And you come back and you say, okay, I want to be peaceful. Show me that peace. I'm willing. And that's in the holy instant. And it truly is the time of Christ. In that holy instant, you are reborn. Right? There is no guilt in that holy instant. Right? So what other gift can you offer me? When only this I choose to offer you. The guiltlessness. And to see me is to see me in everyone. And offer everyone the gift you offer me. So if I offer Jesus the innocence, I offer it to everyone. See him in everyone. All righty then. He says, and there's no need to sacrifice. Sacrifice is not going to get you anywhere. Okay? So, paragraph 3. We who are one cannot give separately. When you are willing to accept our relationship as real, guilt will hold no attraction for you. For in our union, you will accept all of our brothers. The gift of union is the only gift I was born to give. Give it to me, that you may have it. The time of Christ is the time appointed for the gift of freedom, offered to everyone. And by your acceptance of it, you offer it to everyone. All right? We who are one cannot give separately. All right? When you're willing to accept the relationship as real, guilt will hold no attraction for you. All right, so when I'm willing to accept my relationship with Jesus and relationship with God, it says guilt will no longer hold an attraction. It would just be silly. Why would I want that? Okay? The gift of union is the only gift that I was born to give. All right? The gift to remember who you are, to remember the union. Right? That's the gift that Jesus was born to give. All right? He says, give it to me that you may have it. Once again, repeating the theme in the course, that giving and receiving are simultaneous. Right? So, the time of Christ is the time appointed for the gift of freedom offered to everyone. And by your acceptance of it, you offer it to everyone. So he's referring once again to the Christmas season, but also to the holy instant. Right? The time of Christ is the time appointed for the gift of freedom. And he starts off, it is in your power, again, in paragraph 4, it is in your power to make this season holy. For it is in your power to make the time of Christ be now. It is possible to do this at all. It is possible to do this all at once, because there is but one shift in perception that is necessary, for you made but one mistake. It seems like many, but it is all the same. For though the ego takes many forms, it is always the same idea. What is not love is always fear, and nothing else. Let that sink in. What is not love is always fear, and nothing else. Okay? He says it's in your power to make this season holy. That's the choice. We choose to go into the holy instant and ask Jesus, help me to see correctly. It's in your power to make the time of Christ now. And he says it's possible to do this all at once because there's only one shift necessary, because you only made one mistake. So there's that message in the Course in Miracles. Again, over and over again. One problem, one solution. He says there's but one shift in perception that is necessary, for you but made one mistake. It seems like there's many. All right, this sort of seems, oh my God, I got to keep asking to help me see this correctly. There seems to be many, many perceptions. He says, but they're all the same. They all come from the same idea. The belief that I separated from my God. The belief I separated from the oneness. Right? But he says, but the ego takes many forms, although it happens like that. It's always the same idea. Right? It's always the same idea. If it's not love, it's fear and nothing else. Right? If I am not connected to the oneness, if I am not channeling love, then I'm channeling fear. Right? And the fear comes from the guilt, right? The fear of punishment, the fear of, punishment. God's going to get me because I ruined heaven. Oh, Jesus say, no, you made a mistake. You didn't ruin heaven. You think you did. That's your mistake. Right? He says, let me help you reconcile that. Let me help you figure that out, because everything in this cosmos comes from that idea. I separated from God. Now I'm going to get it. All right? And what is not love, your true existence, is fear. Right? And he says it in so many different ways. You who wander the earth, uncertain, lonely, and in constant fear. Right? He calls the ego the detour into fear. Right? There's so many times he refers to the choice to believe I'm separate as the detour into fear. All right. And then, he says, it's not necessary to follow fear through all the circuitous routes by which it burrows underground and hides in darkness, to emerge in forms quite different from what it is. Yet it is necessary to examine each one as long as you would retain the principle that governs all of them. When you are willing to regard them not as separate, but as different manifestations of the same idea, and one which you do not want, they go together. The idea is simply this. You believe it is possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. This is the choice you think you have made, and the decision you believe that you must make. you see no other alternatives. For you cannot accept the fact that sacrifice gets nothing. Sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that salvation, apart from sacrifice, means nothing to you. Your confusion of sacrifice and love is so profound that you cannot conceive of love without sacrifice. And it is this that you must look upon. Sacrifice is attack, not love. If you would accept but this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. For if there is sacrifice, someone must pay, and someone must get. And the only question that remains is how much is the price, and for getting what? Okay, how much are you going to pay? And for what? What are you getting for it? Okay? So he begins paragraph 5 by saying it's not necessary to follow fear all through its circuitous routes. The ego loves to study itself. Okay? And to find, fear in all the forms it takes and all the places it hides. He says it's not necessary to do that. Right? But as long as you would retain the principle that governs them all, as long as you retain that idea that I'm separate from God, that's the principle that governs all fear. He says then you might have to look at its manifestations, all right, in all its works and pomps, as they used to say in the baptismal rituals. All right, it shows up in all kinds of places. And he says it's not necessary to follow it around and analyze it and all that, but he doesn't tell you not to do that, because it says as long as you keep believing that you're separated, you might as well look at it every time it rears its head. And then bring it to me, he says, and let's look at it together. And we'll look at it for what it is and disperse it. Okay. So yet it is necessary to examine each one as long as you retain the principle that governs all of them. And when you are willing to regard them not as separate, but as different manifestations of the same idea, and one you do not want, they go together. Right? Once again, it's just an astute way of presenting the idea that there's one problem, one solution. All right? When you're willing to regard them just as different manifestations of the same idea, all right, then they will go together. All right? And after a while, you get to the point where you just realize, oh, I'm choosing the ego. I don't want that anymore. Okay? So, and he says the idea is simply this: you believe it is possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. You think that the ego will be your friend, and that God is keeping you trapped. All right? This is the choice you think you have, and the decision you believe you must make. So in other words, we put it simply, I guess, it's either we choose to be separate, or we choose the oneness. Wow, I'm a hostage to God, which is pretty silly. All right. That's the choice you think you have. and the decision you believe you must make. You see no other alternatives, for you cannot accept the fact that sacrifice gets nothing. Sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that salvation apart from sacrifice means nothing to you. So that also implies that within the ego thought system, we're hostage to God because we have to keep, making amends, have to keep sacrificing. All right. He says you don't realize that it's ridiculous. It doesn't get you anywhere. He says you can't even conceive of love without sacrifice. Right? I would do anything for them. That's the human condition, right? Right? So he says you can't even conceive of love without sacrifice. And it's this that you must look upon. He says you have to look at this. Sacrifice is attack, not love. All right? Sacrifice is attack, not love. You could dwell on that. All right? If you would accept but this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. So if you could accept that, you wouldn't be afraid of love because you don't have to sacrifice. You're not going to lose anything. Nobody's asking you to do anything. Nobody's asking you to give anything up. All right? Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. All right? And I'm sacrificing, so guilt can't last. Because the reason I'm sacrificing is to chip away at the debt I owe for the guilt. So he says, once you get rid of the idea of sacrifice, guilt goes with it. All right? For if there is sacrifice, someone must pay, and someone must get. All right? And the only question that remains is how much is the price? And for getting what? All right? What am I going to get for the sacrifice here? All right? It's all kinds of bizarre payoffs that have come up throughout the millennia. All right? So, the question remains, what is the price and what am I getting for it? Paragraph 6. As a host to the ego, you believe that you can give all your guilt away whenever you want, and thereby purchase peace. And the payment does not seem to be yours. While it is obvious that the ego does demand payment, it never seems to be demanding it of you. You are unwilling to recognize that the ego, which you invited, is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. The ego will never let you perceive this, since this recognition would make it homeless. For when the recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Each form will be recognized as but a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all, that love demands a sacrifice, and is therefore inseparable from attack and fear, and that guilt is the price of love, which must be paid by fear. This is why this is often referred to as psychological spirituality. Okay? Because it is. I mean, the people that took it down and typed it out, they were psychologists, came through that filter. So, that first sentence, though, is something to think about. It says, as host to the ego, so once you believe you're separated, you've decided to take on the ego's disguise, so to speak, you think that you can give all your guilt away whenever you want to. And by doing that, you become peaceful. All right? That's what the ego tells you. All right? You get that pent-up feeling that you don't like yourself and whatever, that's guilt. All right? And you give it away. You project it onto somebody else. It's them, it's him, it's her. All right? And he says, and you think you're going to be, you're going to purchase peace that way. Right? And the payment doesn't seem to be yours. It's just because you don't realize you're only reinforcing the guilt. So the payment is yours, but you don't realize that. You think in that moment, I'll give away the guilt and I'll be peaceful. Okay? And the payment does not seem to be yours. While it is obvious that the ego does demand payment, it never seems to be demanding it of you. You are unwilling to recognize that the ego, which you invited, is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. Right? The ego is treacherous to all of us who have invited it, who have decided to believe that we are separated from God. The ego is treacherous to those of us who have taken on the guise of separation, the body, right, and everything else that proves separation. It says, but the ego is treacherous to every one of us that do that. Right? You're unwilling to recognize that the ego is treacherous only to those who think, only to those who think that they are its host. And he says, and the ego won't let you look at that. Excuse me. The ego won't let you look at that. Why? Because if you did, sooner or later you'd say, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to be the host to the ego. Okay? So the ego would never let you perceive this, since this recognition would make it homeless. Right? I don't want it anymore. Right? We're making the ego homeless. For when the recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Right? So when we constantly go in for clarification, help me see, the recognition will dawn on us quite fully that this ego thought system it's just ridiculous, to say the least. I don't want it anymore. Okay? For when the recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Each form will be recognized as but a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all, that love demands sacrifice. Right? I'm running away from a God that demands sacrifice, right? Which means I did something, I'm guilty of something, I got to make amends. Right? So we believe that love demands sacrifice. And it is therefore inseparable from attack and fear. Right? And that guilt is the price of love, which must be paid by fear. Right. We have it all twisted. We have a very fearful perception of love. And he says it follows in paragraph 7. How fearful then has God become to you? And how great a sacrifice do you believe his love demands? For total love would demand total sacrifice. And so the ego seems to demand less of you than God. And the two is judged as the lesser of two evils. And of the two, right, the ego is judged as the lesser of two evils, only to be feared a little, perhaps, all right, but the other to be destroyed. All right, the ego, we could fear it a little bit, but God has to be destroyed. Right? For you see love as destructive, and your only question is who is to be destroyed, you or another. You seek to answer this question in your special relationships, in which you seem to be both destroyer and destroyed in part, but able to be neither completely. And this you think saves you from God, whose total love would completely destroy you. All right? God has become fearful to us. We think that love even would destroy us, would just destroy who we are. Okay? He says, God has become fearful to you. All right? Because you believe it is a great sacrifice. His love demands a great sacrifice. All right? For total love would demand total sacrifice. All right? And so the ego seems to demand less of you than God does. And of the two, ego or God, the ego is judged as the lesser of two evils. One to be feared a little, perhaps, but the other to be destroyed. All right. So, you see love as destructive. Okay. Let's see. You seek to answer this question, who's to be destroyed, you or another? Right? And you seek to answer this in your special relationships, in which you seem to be both destroyer and destroyed. Right? We do that dance, right? In the special relationships. I mean, he puts it very succinctly and very strongly here. You play the part of being destroyed, the victim, and the destroyer, the victimizer. Right? We do both in our relationships. Right? And this you think saves you from God, whose total love would completely destroy you, so you think. Paragraph 8, you think that everyone outside yourself demands your sacrifice, but you do not see that only you demand sacrifice, and only of yourself. Yet the demand of sacrifice is so savage and so fearful that you cannot accept it where it is. The real price of not accepting this has been so great that you have given God away rather than look at it. For if God would demand total sacrifice of you, it seems safer to project him outward and away from you, and not to be host to him. To him you ascribed the ego's treachery, inviting it to take his place to protect you from him. And you do not recognize that it is what you invited in that would destroy you and does demand total sacrifice of you. No partial sacrifice will appease this savage guest, for it is an invader who but seems to offer kindness, but always to make the sacrifice complete. Right? The ego wants to destroy, right? And what it wants to destroy is that decision-making part of your mind. Right? It wants to make you mindless, and it will do it any way it can. All right? So, but he's telling us in this paragraph, you project onto God everything about the ego. Right? The ego's, God is out to get me, start from there. And, God is angry, God is this and that, God demands sacrifice. Right? All these things that is actually part of the ego, traits of the ego. And he says, and you don't recognize that it is what you invited in that would destroy you. Right? What I invited in was the ego, the idea that I'm separated from God. He says, that would destroy you. We're not talking about destroying your body. We're talking about destroying the decision-making part of the mind, the part of the mind that can observe and decide, no, I don't want that. That's what the ego is trying to destroy. Okay? So, paragraph 9. You will not succeed in being partial hostage to the ego, for it keeps no bargains and would leave you nothing. Nor can you be a partial host to it. You must choose between freedom and total bondage, for there are no alternatives but these. You have tried many compromises in the attempt to avoid recognizing the one decision you must make. And yet, it is the recognition of the decision, just as it is, that makes the decision so easy. Salvation is simple, being of God, and therefore very easy to understand. Do not try to project it from you and see it outside yourself. In you are both the question and the answer, the demand for sacrifice and the peace of God. All right, so there's the bottom line, literally and figuratively here. It's the choice that always is in front of us. It's the demand for sacrifice and the peace of God. All right? Do I want to choose separation or oneness? All right? In separation, there's always sacrifice. I have to give you some. I have to give God something in order not to get killed. All right? Or do you want the peace of God, which simply is? Those are the choices. And he says, and you won't succeed in being a partial host to the ego or a partial hostage to the ego. Right? You can't have it both ways. You won't succeed, he says. Right? Because it's sooner or later you will make a choice that says, I do not want the ego thought system. I do not want the thought of separation. He says, you've tried many compromises in the attempt to avoid recognizing the one decision you must make. Right? We tried many compromises. Right? Trying to avoid that decision that we must make. Right? He's not condemning us, pointing a finger at us, calling us names or anything. He's just saying, just notice that's what you're doing. And you don't have the peace of God. You're in a world of chaos and fear and loneliness. Okay? And he says, and yet, it's the recognition of this decision, just as it is, that makes the decision so easy. Do I want the peace of God or not? That seems to be the easy decision. Okay? Do not try to project it from yourself. Do not try to project God or your salvation outside of yourself. Right? You won't be able to see it. He says, in you, in your mind, are both question and the answer. Right? The demand for sacrifice and the peace of God. They are both in our mind. Right? We just need to choose. Right? And if we choose the peace of God, we choose it without any pre-formulated ideas of what it looks like. I just want it to arise in my awareness. And that's the moment of rebirth, the time of rebirth, when I go to the holy instant and I say, I want peace. I am reborn in that instant. Okay. I think we can wrap it up there. All right. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to read this. And I look forward to seeing you again. Figuratively speaking, of course. All righty then. That's enough of me. I'll see you next time. Bye.